Welcome to the Megillah Project.
One story, many angles.
Come learn with us.
At its core, the Book of V is a retelling of the Book of Esther, and maybe even more accurately, a midrash on the Book of Esther, given that I approached the original story with a lot of questions and a lot of license. I'm going to talk today about the questions, but first I'll start by giving you a quick overview of the book. So the Book of V is about three very different women. Lily, a mother of two in 2016 Brooklyn, New York, who has given up her career, and sometimes it feels like a whole lot more. Vivian Barr, a senator's wife in 1973 Washington, D.C., who, like Vashti, faces a choice between being humiliated and debased in her own home or giving up her life as she knows it. And Esther, a teenager in ancient Persia who is doing everything in her power, including using magic, not to become queen. And even though the obstacles each woman faces is very different, as their stories interweave and start to converge, you see that they're struggling with the same questions around desire, identity, power. So really the book is about how women's lives have and have not changed over thousands of years. And along the way, there's also a bit of magic and some juicy scandal. It's fiction, obviously, but it grew out of some very real questions that grew out of my own experiences as a girl and a woman and also as a Jew. Let's start with Purim. As a kid, this holiday bewildered me. Why did it feel so different from the other holidays? So not serious, so actually fun and even funny. Why did so many of the grown-ups seem drunk? Because they were commanded to be, I later found out. And for me, this might have been the biggest question, what was the deal with Vashti? Was she a whore? Was she a leper? Both seemed possible. No one seemed to know. The only thing that was clear was that she was bad. Esther, on the other hand, Esther was where it was at if you were a girl. You know, she was beautiful, she was brave, she was virtuous. Flash forward about 30 years, I am given a children's version of the Book of Esther to read to my two kids, which they love. They want me to read it to them all the time. And it's for kids, so you'd think it might answer some of my questions, sort of simplify things. But instead, the story makes even less sense to me now. The plot holes and inconsistencies I'd always wondered about turn out to be here too. And Vashti seems to actually be behaving in a pretty rational and, dare I say, demure manner. Then there's Esther. Now that I'm an adult, it becomes clear to me that Esther, pure Esther, is actually a concubine in a harem. Or, put more bluntly, in this very funny video,
אולי לא הבנתי. אתה רוצה שאני אהיה מחשברוש?
כן.
וקצת פוצי מוצי?
להציל את העם.
נו, אז זה כמו זונה.
לא, זה לא כמו זונה.
זה לא כמו זונה, זה זונה.
זה לא זונה.
זה כן זונה.
זה לא זונה.
זה כן זונה.
I was driven to understand this. I went to my rabbi and I went back to the original Book of Esther and to many writings about it, everything from midrash by the Babylonian rabbis to effusive praise poems about Vashti in late 19th century America, to the wonderful JPS commentary on Esther that's written by Adele Berlin, which helped me come to understand, among many other things, the Book of Esther itself as a quite elaborate and artful work of fiction, specifically as a burlesque that's posing as historical record with the purpose of establishing a raucous holiday that would give Jews a chance to blow off steam. Whew, that was a lot for me to take in. And maybe it's a surprise to you to think about it in that way too. All this time I was asking, in what ways did the story we've traditionally been told about the Book of Esther match up with the Book of Esther itself? And in what ways did it diverge? These questions drove me to take a look at another story, this one a story that had been told to me my whole childhood as a girl growing up white with considerable privilege in the late 70s and 80s on the heels of the second wave women's movement. And this story was, the fight is over, equality has been won, my life and choices would now be the same as any boy's life. Then I grew up, and here I was, a wife and mother of two, well into the 21st century. And for me and most women I knew, and beyond that for women around the country and globe of so many backgrounds, well, our lives were absolutely inside and out different from men's. And along with that, our lives in many ways did not look or feel so different from our mothers and even our grandmothers' lives, despite the stories we had been told about how they would. And that was before the pandemic. What I wanted to explore in particular was how the difference between what many women were told our lives should look and feel like and how they actually look and feel creates a sense of confusion and often shame. For women who'd been told they should focus on a career, but who wound up at home with kids, and for women who were told they should become mothers, but didn't wind up wanting kids, and for so many others, how do we come to terms with not being the types of women we were expected to become? Which brings me back to Esther and Vashti. What if instead of those binaries I'd been taught, where Vashti was bad and wanton and selfish, and Esther was pure and selfless, what if the story was told in a more honest, multifaceted way, told perhaps by a woman? The Book of V is my attempt to re-envision not only the Book of Esther, but also the very categories and types women are so often reduced to in all kinds of stories, those we see in movies and on Instagram and in the Bible, and also those we're told by our mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers. In the book, I wanted to let all my characters, Lily, Vivian Barr, Esther, and even Vashti, who does appear in the book, though I won't give away here how or when, I wanted to let them begin to take charge of and tell their own stories. The book is my own act of midrash. I hope it's added another perspective to the way we view the book of Esther and Purim, and maybe to our lives as well.